It was the most scenic, most demanding, most rewarding backpacking trip I've ever done. The Presidential Traverse. 3 days, 2 nights, 21 miles, 10 stunning mountain summits, and 9,500 feet of elevation gain in the rugged and difficult terrain of the Presidential Range in New Hampshire's White Mountains. It was a bucket list trip. Simply put, it was epic. Well, it would have been epic if our plan had actually come to pass. You see, after 6 months of research, posting questions on forums, planning, and even conditioning workouts, something I've never done for any other hike, I had to cancel the trip only 36 hours before we began our 15-hour drive east. But that's the funny thing about life. Sometimes we make meticulous, well-thought-out plans. Oftentimes they go as expected. But then there's the times when life happens and even our best-laid plans fall apart. The last couple weeks of summer were quickly slipping away, like campfire smoke evaporating into the cool night air. Planning another trip seemed highly unlikely. But that's when something happened that was not planned. Quite unexpectedly, we learned of a new trail that met all the necessary criteria. It was one we had never hiked, it was close to home, and it only required a couple of days to complete, even at a leisurely pace, the Potawatomi Trail. We didn't know what the trail would be like, how many miles we would hike each day, or even where we would camp at night. But maybe dealing with the unknown as it came up is what would make the trip interesting and different. Maybe this time we would find solace in the unplanned. The last several miles were scenic and relaxing as we traversed miles of hilly, tree-lined roads. But that was before we ended up in hell, literally. Hell, Michigan is an unincorporated community in southern Lower Michigan, and it provided some laughs and photo opportunities before we finally arrived at our starting location, a small dirt parking lot right off the edge of the road. It felt good to cinch up my trail runners, shoulder my pack, and walk away from the car, a symbol of the schedules and busyness of modern life that we were hoping to escape for a couple of days. With only a couple dozen steps behind me, I heard the wind rustling through the treetops. It seemed as though the forest was extending a warm, welcoming greeting. "Hello, my friend. It's nice to see you again." Crunching leaves, pleasant smells in the air, and squirrels moving effortlessly through the trees quickly filled me with a feeling of relaxation and calm. It was like a long, tight hug from a dearly missed friend. It's sometimes easy to overlook the beauty and diversity of nature, its sights, sounds, colors, and textures. But that's easily avoided by slowing down and taking note of the countless stimuli that interact with your senses. Who knows? Maybe that would be easier this time since I was not keeping pace with a detailed plan. The trail's easygoing terrain treated me well. Maybe the forest knew that this time I would find enjoyment, not in the difficulty to reward ratio, but rather in those small, simple things that typically go unnoticed. The trail carried us past a hand pump, a large wooden map, and then down a hill to the shore of Blind Lake. We hadn't been on the trail for long, but the tranquil setting, falling leaves, and cool, gentle breeze beckoned us to stop for a snack. Not having a plan appeared to be working out in our favor so far. We only lingered for a few minutes, but before continuing our hike, I wandered up a hill to the area where several campsites were located. A large tree stood prominently at the top of the ridge. Its gnarled and commanding presence gave it the appearance of a sentry keeping watch over the humans and forest creatures that entered its domain. It appeared to be much older than the other trees, and I wondered what stories it would tell if it could speak. As we continued down the leaf-covered dirt path, The sunshine filtering through the trees decorated the trail with mottled patterns of light and dark. At one point, we emerged from the woods and encountered a planked walkway over a large, marshy area. The gentle breeze and warm sunshine felt good on my face, but the sound of passing cars momentarily reminded me that I was closer to civilization than I had realized. However, moments later, we were back in the woods, and the sounds of civilization once again faded from my ears. We passed two interesting sights toward the end of the day. The first was a makeshift teepee just off the edge of the trail. The second was a bit more interesting, a stone fireplace and root cellar, the only remaining structures from the mid-1800s homestead of John and Bridget Geenan. I wondered how many conversations that old fireplace had heard during all of the years that it served the Geenan family. As we walked away from the historic site, we encountered a soft, cushiony blanket of pine needles covering the trail. The day hadn't been long or the trail difficult, but still, our feet were thankful for the pleasant change. It was a nice way to round out the day. Eventually, we found a suitable location to hang our hammocks, and after a short rest under the forest canopy, we ventured out in search of water. By now, the transition from day to night was well underway, and the orange and apricot hues of sunset bathed the landscape in a soft, warm glow. Surely God had provided this beautiful scene to refresh my soul. A weathered but sturdy bridge provided a comfortable platform that allowed me to fill my Vecto bag from a clear area of the marsh. I attached my water filter, a small marvel of modern technology, and watched as cold, crystal clear liquid filled our bottles. I gathered enough water for cooking and cleanup, then topped off the bag so there would be no need to return to the bridge before heading out the following morning. Upon re-entering the woods, I was shocked to discover how quickly daylight was fading amongst the trees. We needed to get back to camp and cook our meals because it wouldn't be long before darkness permeated every inch of the forest. It hadn't been a difficult day, yet it still felt good to sit down, rest our weary feet, and replenish lost calories in the comfort of our spacious wilderness dining room as the wind whooshed through the trees around us.
I don't remember where I found it. I think it was.
Hiker Midnight arrived soon after the last sliver of orange disappeared below the horizon. After a time of conversation, I climbed in my hammock, buried myself beneath a warm layer of down-filled goodness, and allowed the soothing nighttime sounds to lull me to sleep. The overnight hours alternated between periods of heavy rain and spring-like drizzle. The heavy rains woke me and were nice to listen to, but when its intensity eased up, the gentle pitter-patter of rain on my tarp had a soothing, narcotic-like effect that always put me back into a deep sleep. By the time we awoke, the rain had completely disappeared, but thick clouds remained in its wake, and as the morning progressed, we only saw brief glimpses of blue and an otherwise constant sea of gray, gloomy clouds. How many miles we would hike and where we would stop for the night were yet to be determined. For now, the only plan we had for our second day was to walk through a landscape that was transitioning from summertime greens to the oranges, yellows, and reds of fall. Partway through the day, the dirt trail carried us out of the forest and back into civilization. We refilled our water bottles at a hand pump and continued on as we passed through a parking lot, paralleled a large lake, and then finally re-entered the forest.
And the next one will be
There were a couple of times throughout the day when the trail passed next to or over a small stream. The sound of the trickling water was so tranquil that we often found ourselves lingering for a while, just to take in the beauty around us. A lonely bench at the junction of two trails presented the perfect place to stop for lunch. As we ate and talked, the forest never skipped a beat. It appeared to be unhindered by our presence and continued its fall transformation as hundreds of leaves fluttered silently to the ground around us. The remaining miles seemed to pass quickly as we crossed more bridges, roads, marshes, and rivers. Before we knew it, we stumbled upon a large clearing that begged us to stop for the night. Not only did we have sturdy trees for our hammocks and a nice view of the lake, but the open expanse above us provided an unobstructed view of countless stars after the sky turned black. Day number 2 without a plan had gone well. Breathing a night's worth of crisp fall air had left me refreshed and ready for our last day. I enjoyed easing into the day from the comfort of my warm hammock as the slowly brightening sky transformed silhouettes into trees and distant landmarks. The early morning air was still brisk, so a cup of hot chocolate helped warm my insides as I gazed out at the muted colors of the tree line across the lake. After a light breakfast, we stepped into a landscape bathed in golden sunshine and popping with vibrant colors. We were anxious to see what our last few miles had in store for us. During our 3 days in the woods, I couldn't help contemplate how things had played out over the last several weeks. For months we had planned what should have been an iconic and personally rewarding backpacking trip, but it ended before it even began. I was disappointed for a couple of days and frequently wondered, why did this happen? But several days later, I got my answer. An answer I never could have predicted. And in that very moment, the words of a Bible verse came back to me. Words that brought razor-sharp focus and clarity to everything that had transpired. Proverbs 16, verse 9 says, "A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord determines his steps." We had spent months planning a backpacking trip based on research we did, facts we knew, and possibilities we were reasonably able to anticipate. But that's when Providence intervened. Our hearts and minds had planned our way, but God redirected our steps because He saw something we couldn't: the future. If our plan had gone as expected, things would have turned out much differently, not only for us, but also for several other people. Our unintended cancellation had actually been a blessing in disguise. Plans are a necessary part of life and are meant to be guides to lead us from one point to another, whether for small daily tasks or for our lives as a whole. Sometimes they need to be meticulous and unwavering, and other times they can be loosely made and flexible. So what was the lesson in all of this? We need to remember that God is ultimately in control, and when He redirects our steps, there's always a reason, whether we eventually learn why or not.